What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and as you all know, this is one of my favorite videos that we do every single month. And this video, of all the ones that we've done, I think is chocked with some of the biggest information we've seen in a long, long time. Now, some of it isn't what we typically see. There's actually some softness in the grading market that we've been doing this video for 14 consecutive months, and usually we see these nice upward in the right trajectories, but we're starting to see a downward trend. Now, I don't think that's any reason for alarm. I don't think that's anything to be concerned about, right? Markets are cyclical, but it is something we haven't seen, and I'm excited to talk about that today. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit at the beginning about PSA buying SGC and what I feel about that. And then also, spoiler alert, there's going to be some One Piece on here. I need everybody to remember, this video has been all about Pokemon ever since we started doing it, but it encompasses all TCG cards, and there just hasn't been anything besides Pokemon in the TCG space that has the grading velocity to show up on these charts. But guess what? We finally see One Piece coming up for 2 months in a row, and that is not something we should sleep on. It's something we should talk about. Now, one of the reasons I get so excited about this information is because I think this is a macro level view of what's going on in the hobby, right? You think about the grading space. The grading space involves individual collectors, like people who are getting their PC cards graded, individual collectors who are trying to get some PC cards turned into like real investment pieces. I think that getting your cards graded is the best way to turn a regular raw card into a true investment piece for not only protection, but long-term price appreciation. You also have the little guys and girls out there who are buying cards raw, getting them graded, trying to sell them for a profit. And then you have the huge companies that are doing this at 1,000 times a month, you know, buying tons of raw cards, getting tons of them graded. They're doing it at scale, and they're trying to make money doing that. So when we go through this video, we're going to look at the most graded sets. We're going to look at the most graded individual cards. We're going to look at the most graded characters. Like, there is just so much information in here, and I think this is an awesome opportunity for us to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on at a macro level. And really, nobody else is talking about this stuff, and I think it's absolutely crazy because there's a lot of good information here that I think we all benefit from. Now, if that kind of stuff excites you, hey, we do a ton of work here on this video, so we would appreciate it if you find value in it. Hit that subscribe button. If you have questions or comments, drop them down below, and as always, if you like what you see, give us a big old thumbs up. So before we get into the actual data side of things, I want to talk at a high level about PSA buying SGC. And you all know I am a PSA guy. I have reaped the rewards of buying PSA slabs for the last 20 years. You know, I've been able to increase my overall net worth because I've been buying PSA slabs for a long time, and I've had some that have done really well for me. So I'm a big PSA guy. Not only that, I just think they do it right. I think they have a great understanding of the hobby, and they seem to do a good job. Of course, they're not perfect. But when I heard they were buying SGC, honestly, it made me sad. And one of the reasons is, if you look at those two graphs down below, the graph on the left, you can see where all of the big four grading companies are, right? You got PSA, CGC, Beckett, and SGC. Look how far above PSA is compared to everybody else, right? We actually have to pull PSA out in order to do the graph in the middle, so we can get something that we can actually visually identify the trends for the other three companies. And I really wanted a 1A, right? I really wanted grading company A is going to be PSA, but then grading company B to be whoever it was going to be. I wanted somebody to challenge PSA, right? Like, everybody needs a rival. Rivals make you better. Rivals push you to innovate, and they push you to do things better. And they can make you nervous at times, and that's a healthy thing in business. And I think now that SGC, if you look at the graph there in the middle, SGC's been climbing pretty steadily in items graded by month really over the last year. So SGC was doing good. They had some great momentum. I've been talking about it a lot on this channel about how pumped I was to see SGC improving, and now PSA comes in and buys them. So we got to find another group that's going to challenge PSA, and I would assume that PSA is going to run SGC as an independent subsidiary for a while, right? I've been a part of acquisitions. I've been on the acquisition side, and I've been on the side that has been acquired, and a lot of times they run as an independent subsidiary for a while, kind of what eBay's doing with TCG Player. eBay owns TCG Player, but I do expect at some time they're going to merge, and I just don't want SGC to lose what it is, because I have always said SGC is my second favorite to PSA. So I think we need to let this flush out a little bit. Certainly not making any, you know, bold proclamations today as to what this is going to end up being, but it does make me a little sad, right? So the rich get richer. We will have to see. At least it's my company that I favor, buying a smaller one versus something crazy happening and like PSA dissolving. But when we look at the 2023 trends so far, so let's actually talk about some of the data that's going to be in here in the video. We're going to talk about PSA here. You know, this is another month where we see some pretty good grading volume up. Now, month over month, the actual TCG grading volume is down, right? Here in the PSA space, it's actually down 9%, but year over year, it's up 11%. But then in this graph on the left where I have the purple circles, where you look at overall items graded, like 2023 from an overall grading perspective for PSA is actually starting off a little bit stronger than it did last year, which thumbs up, that's a good thing, right? And then when you look at the secondary grading companies, SGC, CGC, Beckett, look at how strong their TCG and non-sport year-over-year growth is, right? CGC's year-over-year growth for this month was 49%. Beckett, only 6%. SGC was up 24%. And my man Beckett, listen, I love Beckett. I have so many fond memories of running to the mailbox as a kid and getting the Beckett magazine because we didn't have the internet back then, but Beckett just can't seem to get it together for whatever reason. Now, when you look at the overall grading numbers at SGC, okay, SGC really is doing a bunch of stuff in the sports card space, right? Like they're not a huge player here in the TCG space. So when we talk about the acquisition, right, like last month, SGC only graded 17,000 TCG and non-sports cards, where even Beckett, as low of a performer as Beckett is, Beckett did double that, right, at 32,000, and CGC did 151,000. So when you look at it from an overall card perspective, SGC is a big player, but when just in the TCG space, they're not that much. So I don't think that the acquisition is going to really affect us in the TCG space too much, but overall, we'll just have to see what that does for PSA in the long run. Now we're going to start getting into some of the stuff I really enjoy, and this is the most graded sets list, and it's been interesting to watch kind of this push and pull between English and Japanese sets. Now, the last couple months, it's been 5 and 5. 5 English sets on here, 5 Japanese sets on here. Now, Japanese just barely regains control this month, so now they're up. They have 6 of the 10 sets on here. But what I really wanted to call out and what is really interesting is we do see One Piece on here, right? I teased it earlier in the video. We have One Piece Japanese promos on here, and that is a big freaking deal. We have only, throughout the history of doing this, seen one other non-Pokemon set actually show up on here, and that was a Lorcana first chapter, which showed up for one single month a while ago, and then it immediately dropped out. Now, we will have to see if One Piece shows up again next month, but there's a lot of momentum, and you're going to see One Piece again further on in this video. And I've been talking about this a lot recently. The other thing that gets me, I don't say concerned, but it's certainly something that's kind of got my spidey senses going, is you'll see the name of the sets there, but then you see the total graded all time, and that's displayed in thousands. So if you look at the very top one right there, you'll see Pokemon Japanese 151 right there at the very top. There's been 246,000 of those cards already graded, and the Japanese grading volume is absolutely insane when you compare it to its English counterparts, right? So I broke it down here. You see Shiny EX, right, which is a new set, a brand freaking new set, right? There have already been 28,000 of those Japanese cards graded. And when you compare that to English 151, right? I know English 151 has been out 3 more months, but English 151 is an absolute fire set that everybody loves and everybody is buying. And even though it's been out for 3 months, it has only been graded 69,000 times, right? So then I thought, hey, let's look at Japanese 151 versus English 151. Again, Japanese 151 has a 3-month head start, but still, there has been 246,000 Japanese 151 cards graded versus 69,000 English 151. Again, 3 months does not make up that gap. There is just a huge number of these Japanese cards that are being graded. And then if you want to look at it again, which is a little more close comparison, but the Japanese Scarlet and Violet promos, right? There's been 119,000 of those graded versus 57,000 of the English graded. Now again, listen, supply and demand. There could be much more demand for those Japanese cards, which means even though there's more supply, the prices are going to be okay. But for me, it's really challenging when you see these crazy high numbers. Look at V-Star Universe. There's been almost 400,000 Japanese V-Star Universe cards graded, which is just an insane number. You know, when you're talking about great investments, things that you are going to buy today that are going to be worth a ton of money in the future, the key is finding something that people are going to want in the future that people are overlooking right now. It is not easy to do. It is very hard to do. That's why not everybody's rich, right? So when you see everybody piling into one thing today, you have to think that the demand is either going to be 3, 4, 5x in the future for that same product, or you got to look in a different direction, right? If everybody's going left and you go left, well, guess what? The people who go right, sure, so that's a risk. Some people might not make any money at all. They might lose money. But there are going to be some people that go right when everybody else goes left. They hit that pot of gold and they make a ton of money. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to protect your downside. I think that you can spend 80% of your money going left, and I think you can spend 20% of your money taking risks and going right. You know, you diversify your portfolio. But for me, it's really interesting to see these Japanese numbers, and it really makes me scratch my head. I'm like, man, what can these do in the long run? But PikaPikaPaPa channel is going to be around for a long time, so we'll track it and we'll see where it all shakes out. Now, the next ones right here are PSA's most graded individual cards, and here we see another another language on here, right? Instead of just English and Japanese, we finally see Chinese on here. And this isn't even simplified Chinese. This is traditional Chinese. So we have 3 Japanese cards, we have 1 traditional Chinese, and all the rest are English on here. So the English takes the crown here on this one. Now, what's interesting to me is that Pikachu with gray felt hat, my God, has this card been graded. There is already almost 27,000 of these that have been graded. 4,700 of them were graded alone in the month of February. And when you go down that list, that is double any other card. Even though it's down 35% month over month, that card, I mean, I love the card. I love the story. I have 2 of them. My 2 are actually at PSA. I waited for a long time to send them, which I always tell people not to do, but I did anyways. So who knows? I'm going to add 2 to that pile at some point, but it's very interesting to see, you know, listen, this card was going to be the next big thing, but I think it's just been printed into the ground and graded into the ground. It'll be interesting to see what kind of price it can hold in the long run. Now, what was really interesting to me too is we starting to see some of these big Chase Zards pop up here again with really big numbers, right? You have the Pokemon 151 Chase Zard right there in English. There's almost 8,000 of those already graded, and a 151's only been out for 6 months. Again, like how many of those need to be graded for the prices to start dropping, or like how many can the market absorb, right? There's already 8,000. There's a lot of life left in 151, a lot of printing left in 151. Could this end up being a Zard that's graded 10, 12, 14,000 times, right? Like I've got a video coming out in the middle of next week where I'm looking at all the Sword and Shield Chase cards and their PSA 10 population relative to price and relative to popularity. If you want to check it out, it's going to be an awesome one. And I asked the question, like, how much is too much of a graded card, especially in the ultra modern space? And then you get down into the Obsidian Flames, right? Almost 9,000 of the Obsidian Flames Charizard has been graded. That's another one that's staring down the barrel of 10, 12, 14,000. It's going to be interesting where this all lines up. Again, they're awesome cards. They're great collector's pieces. But when I'm thinking about a pure investment, it's going to be interesting to see how long they can hold on. Now, that Chinese card, it came from the Pokemon Center in Taipei, which is really cool. I always love it when we see diversity, and there's all kinds of diversity on here. We've seen times where Pikachu has dominated this list or whatever has been on here a ton of times, but there really is a lot of diversity on here, and that gets me really, really excited. So the very next one right here, now this is another one where I have taken a bunch of information and I've taken it from typing out all the numbers and turned it into a graph because I just think that's a easier way to look at this stuff. So if you haven't seen this before, here's what I do. I take the total number of TCG cards that are graded at PSA, and then I do that up against the total number of baseball, basketball, and football cards that are graded at PSA. I call it the ball sports versus TCG, and I do that because I have this strong conviction that in time, I don't think anytime soon, but I think over time, TCG is going to be much bigger than the 3 major ball sports combined. That's my belief. That's one of the reasons I'm in this hobby, and what we have seen, at least over the last 6 months, is that number has gotten really, really tight, right? Like if you go back to December of 2022, you see that there's a big gap, and then in January of 2022 there's a big gap. Then you see in February it got close, and then there were some big gaps there for a while. But really, if you look over the last 6 months, you see that that white line and that orange line have been very close, except in February. Look at that divergence. Look at that white line shoot up. I'm going to tell you, ball sports had an absolute bang in February, and TCG just did not, right? The total grading volume in February was all the way down to about where it was in November. Again, when you look year over year, yes, the numbers are up, but we're talking about trend lines, right? PSA has opened a brand new grading center in Japan, so yes, one would expect year over year numbers to be up because they added another freaking grading center. So what I'm looking for is trends, and this trend is starting to break a little bit. Again, 1 month is not a big deal. 1 month does not mean anything is fundamentally changed, but 1 month means, hey, we got to take note of it, and we'll talk about it next month when we come into it. But really interesting to see such a big break right there, and hey, kudos to ball sports. Way to have an epic February. Now, the next thing we talk about right here is the most graded subjects, and here's where it's really, really interesting and just really unique, okay? So first and foremost, Pikachu has been at the top of this list for 7 consecutive months. Charizard has been playing second, but guess what? The king has regained the throne. Charizard is back in first place, but that is not the big highlight here. The big highlight is Monkey D. Luffy right there. I don't even know what to say. We have seen somebody from the non-TC or the non-Pokemon space pop up here from time to time, very rarely, I think 2 other times, and then 3 months ago, we had Monkey pop up here and was in at number 11. And then last month it came up at number 6. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to say if it's on here 3 months in a row and if it climbs the rankings. Not only is it on here 3 months in a row, but it's up to number 4. And I want you to think about this. Conceptualize this. Think about all the Charizard and Pikachu and Mew cards that are out there in the world right now. Again, this has been out. These cards have been out since 1996 in Japan, 1999 in the US. There are just tons and tons and tons of options for those cards to be graded. Think about the Monkey Monkey card, right? Like that, we're only on OP5. I think OP6 is dropping this month. Like the pool of cards to pull from is infinitely smaller than the Charizard, Pikachu, Mew, and yet Monkey comes in at number 4 on this list. That is just incredibly powerful. That means that tons and tons and tons of people are all up in One Piece and are grading that. Now, as exciting as that is, I'm going to tell you right now, that's also like a cautionary tale. If you think that some of these cards are going to be worth, multiples, in the future, of course it will. It'll go up in value. But again, remember, one of the things that made those early era sets so valuable, those early era cards so valuable in the Pokemon space, was they were of poor quality further down the road, right? People weren't holding on to them. They weren't keeping sealed product. Everybody was ripping them. Heck, my sister had a shoebox full of Pokemon cards and they're all useless because they're all absolute trash. But now with One Piece coming out, people are taking good care of these cards. There's going to be tons and tons and tons of Monkey D. Luffy PSA 10s in the future versus there's not a whole lot of them. So all of the original era Pokemon cards. So all I'm saying is this, take it with a bit of caution, understand that, hey, listen, One Piece has got a ton of excitement in the market. Everybody's obviously hyped about it. Everybody's taking a part of it. I think that is a great thing, but also understand that this isn't going to be some first edition holo Charizard in the future because the supply is going to be much, much higher. Now, the other thing I want to call out is down there, Nami right there. Heck, it's got a Pokeball next to it, but I'm 99.9% sure that that's also a One Piece card. So not only do we see Monkey D. Luffy all the way up at number 4, but we got Nami down there, which is making the list as well. And again, this is just things that we never see. So unfortunately, our good friend Zapdos dropped off the list to make room for Nami, but hey, my man Squirtle is still on here, hanging on at the very, very bottom. Absolutely love that, but this is going to be such an exciting list to watch for the future months to come. So the other one we always talk about, and I always say take this with a big grain of salt, is this is the gem rate broken down by era, and you can see we have PSA, Beckett, SGC, CGC. It breaks it down into the sports card space and the TCG space. I always call out, we talk about how terrible the quality is in the TCG space. Just be thankful that you're not in the sports card space because there's about 20 points of delta between the gem rate in sports and in TCG across the board. So it's absolutely crazy. The other thing that's interesting to me is you see the gem rates in SGC and CGC. Those are pretty closely linked. And then you see the gem rates in PSA and Beckett closely linked, right? But I always say this, hey, listen, Beckett's always going to get a nod because there are people out there who are chasing those black labels, and so only 2% end up making the black label. I think it's a little bit less than that, 1.9, 1.8%. So you're going to have a lot more Beckett 9.5 simply because people are chasing those black labels. So really interesting stuff to talk about, and again, take it all with a big grain of salt. Grade with the company that you love, grade with the company that makes you happy. Don't grade based off of this, but it is cool data and cool stuff for us to look at. Now, the next thing right here is what I wanted to talk about, where I said in the beginning, there's a little bit of a cautionary tale here, right? Like TCG grading is up year over year, but as I said, right, we opened a brand new grading center, so people would expect it to be up year over year. But what we're seeing here is a couple interesting things. We're seeing a couple interesting things where in December of last year, right, there was 410,000 TCG cards graded, and then in January, it dropped down to 355,000, and then in February, it popped up to 420,000, right? So we saw December, January, February, but December and February were pretty freaking flat. Now look at the right side of this, where I circled there. This is 2024. It peaked in December. December it was at 568,000, January down to 530,000, and in February it was down to 489,000. Again, I don't think this is a big deal. I think this is just something to watch, but seeing the downward trend in TCG cards graded by month when the trend starts to buck what we saw last year. Now I will say this, if you look last year in March was a freaking huge grading month. So we will be interested to see what happens in the month of March this year. Hopefully we see this shoot back up. And if we don't, again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing, right? Markets are cyclical. It's just a thing for us to keep an eye on. But I do find it very interesting to see that the grading cards have actually been on a downward trend for the last 3 months here in the TCG space. So the very last thing I always talk about right here is outside of just TCG, a strong card market is good for all of us. I want baseball cards to be strong. I want football cards to be strong. Basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, you name it. I just want a strong cardboard market as a whole because that lets me know that, hey, listen, alternative investors, people who are looking for investments outside of your traditional stocks and bonds and real estate and all of that are comfortable coming into this market. And that's what we need, right? Like if you're in this for the long run like me, 5, 10, 15 years from now, I want to make sure that the overall card market is very strong. strong. There'll be time when ball sports are in favor. There's going to be time when TCG cards are in favor. All I care about is that the hobby as a whole is growing. And I'm going to say right now, the overall grading market is very, very strong, which to me projects strength overall for the cardboard market. Now, next month, as I said, is very important to me. I think I got a lot of cards, a lot of eggs in the basket of next month to see what happens with that grading. I'm expecting a big spike. And if it doesn't happen, we're going to have to talk through that and what that means. We'll do some trend lines and we'll see where that stacks up. But I always say this, markets are cyclical. We're going to have times where years don't line up to the previous year. We're going to have times where things ebb and flow, prices go up, prices go down, grading volume goes up, down, sideways, all over the place. All I care about is a long-term trend in the positive direction. And you know what? When markets turn bad, you know what I do? I back up the Poke truck and I get ready to buy, because that is when fortunes are made. Fortunes are made in down markets, not up markets. So we'll keep a close eye on this and see how it all pans out, but it'll be something to keep an eye on. So if you're interested in being the first to see that video next month when it comes out, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this content, give us a thumbs up. There's a lot of stuff we talk about. If you have questions or comments, drop them down below. I can't possibly thank you enough for watching. You all are freaking rock stars and I appreciate you. You have an epic one and I'll talk to you soon. See you everybody. Bye.